Today we talk about Divided Republic, published by Numskull Games. This is a political game that relies on a card-driven engine. It depicts the 1860 American election. It is for up to 4 players that will control several parties, up to 4 parties with a main candidate each. I said up to, but probably this is a 4-player game mainly. In order to win the game, a player will need to gain a lot of control over the territory. The players are trying to gain control of the states that will vote the general election, and of course you are going for states that have a good number of electoral votes. However, in order to win the game and to become the president of the United States, a player needs to collect 152 electoral votes, which is extremely hard, especially with 4 parties fighting against each other. It is pretty hard for a player to become such a runaway leader to be able to achieve that. In that case, the way in which the election is resolved is by counting states. Each state at that point counts as one, and the player that controls the majority of states is the winner. There are also ways in which actually all players may lose the game, but let me show you how the game works now. Here you have the very nice looking mounted board. The 4 players will control a party each, and the 4 parties are the Republicans, the Northern Democrats, the Southern Democrats, and the Constitutional Unionists. The map is divided in states, the states that voted in the 1860 election, and states are grouped by regions such as Lower South, Upper South, Middle West, and so forth. Here you have a momentum track in which you will place the pawns representing the parties in the game, and you will place them on the momentum track in the order in which you see them there from first to fourth during setup. This is the standard setup order. Being first on the momentum track is good because when cards are dealt at the beginning of each turn, you receive an extra card for being the player that has the highest value in momentum. And several times during the game, regional areas will be scored, and the players that do better will gain better positions on the momentum track. Also, the momentum track indicates the order in which players play during the turn, so there is that factor there too. Each state has 2 numbers printed in the box corresponding to the state. These 2 numbers are first a large one, which indicates the number of cubes that a player must own in that area in order to control that area. You need to have at least that amount of cubes, and if more than one player has equal to or more than the required minimum amount, then the player that controls the state is the player that has more than the other player. For example, one player has 4, another player has 3, both have the minimum, but control belongs to the player with 4 cubes there. If there's a tie, no matter which total amount players have, say they both have 3, they both have 4, then nobody controls the state. States also have a smaller number there, and that represents the number of electoral votes that the state will give to the controlling party when it is time to count final votes on election day. Also, states may have other symbols such as this asterisk here, and these symbols represent the special characteristics that the states have. For example, states with the asterisks are states where the Republicans cannot campaign. States with this symbol are strongholds for the party represented by the color of the stronghold symbol, and of course there's an advantage when you're fighting in your own stronghold state. The game will last up to 6 turns, yes, up to, because the game may end earlier if certain conditions are met that will make South Carolina secede from the Union, And if that happens, if players met those conditions, then the game is over and everybody loses the game. So this is not a cooperative game, not even a semi-cooperative game. Still, players have to guard against the possibility that the union will break and everybody will lose the game. 6 turns, as we said, up to. Each turn will have 5 actions. After that, the turn is over. New cards are dealt. Yes, because it's a card-driven game, players will receive cards each turn, and the number of cards that they receive may be affected by several factors. And these are the cards. They come from this deck here, and these cards are very well done. They look very good. They're very thematic. I really like the way they look. Cards have a number printed in the upper left corner, and they have an event described in the bottom section of the card. When it is your turn, like in other card-driven games, you play a card, and you can play it for the numeric value or for the action. If you play with the numeric value, the number of the card that you played represents the number of cubes that you can add to the board. Cubes that in turn represent your influence in the areas in which you are playing the card, placing the cubes, campaigning. And of course, you're trying to gain control of states in order to steal control from other players. Usually the cost to place a cube is 1 point per cube, but there are penalties. If you are placing cubes in regions different from the first one in which you placed your first cube, then the cost is +1. That means if you're campaigning in more than one region per turn, you will have extra costs. Also, if you are placing cubes in areas that are controlled by other players, then you will have to spend extra points, and then there is a penalty of +1 point per such cube. For example, if the Unionists want to add a cube there in a state that is controlled by the Northern Democrats, then they will need to spend 2 points. 1 standard +1 for the control that the opponent has in the area. On the other hand, you can also choose to play the card for the event. Then you simply read the instructions and you execute the instructions. Most of these are self-explanatory. Some are cards that you play during your turn, then you execute the event during your turn, such as this one and this one. Some cards may also be reaction cards. They allow you to react to other players' card, such as this one, and you play them during the turn of the opponents. Then you have some special actions that are a little more complex. One such action is the platform speech. When you play a platform speech card, you select a region that you're targeting with that speech. You roll 1d6, you add the modifier that you see here, and that changes depending on the region that you're targeting. That means that certain regions will be more affected than others by certain speeches that are more relevant to them. For example, a speech about abolition will have more intense effect in the northeast and in the lower south with a modifier of 2. So you roll a die, add the modifier, and that the final number represents the number of enemy cubes that you can remove from the board or of your own cubes that you can add to the board in that region. And when you're adding cubes to the board because of special game effects such as this one, then you can disregard the penalties that I explained earlier, for example, for adding cubes in enemy areas that are controlled by an opponent. Another important type of event is the regional polling. Such a card, when played for the event, will initiate polling in the states indicated on the card. Then you simply check control in the states indicated on the card, and you will then hand out cards to as a memory aid to indicate the players that control each state. Not all cards will be assigned in case some states are not controlled by anybody, but as players start controlling states and the control is scored during the original polling, then players will collect these cards. The player that has most of these cards in his hand goes first on the momentum track, and the other players go after in decreasing order. And if there is a tie for control of states, and that also means on the momentum track, then players simply break the tie by rolling a die to see who goes first on the momentum track. So this is the phase where the momentum track is adjusted. Also, this is the phase when states may be locked. That means that if a player has control in a state and at least twice as many points are necessary to control that state, then during the regional polling phase, the state is locked. You can remove the cubes at that point because there is no need to campaign or do anything in that state. The state is now loyal to the party that locked the state no matter what, and it will vote for that state on election date. And then there are other rules and mechanics that apply to specific situations. For example, there is the personal appearance of the candidate, and that is a special action that you can take in a turn and doesn't actually even count as an action, and will give you one of several possible benefits, all pretty good. Each party has a specific special power, specific special ability, special advantage. For example, the Republicans get an extra card. Other parties get to lift some of the penalties that the others have to pay for. So there is more, even more theme there, and you do have the sense of different parties, not just different colors on the board used to differentiate the cubes that the players are placing on the board. In conclusion, this is a game that I enjoyed. If you compare it with other card-driven political games such as Virgin Queen, for example, which I played last year, this clearly is less deep, less involved, players will find it less epic, and the options are much more limited. At the same time, there are advantages, of course, that this game has. This is more of a semi-casual game. It still takes a couple of hours to play, but you can play it in a single session. And you can teach it to new players right there. You do not have to train them in advance, to ask them to read the rulebook in advance like you have for other games such as, say, Virgin Queen. Not many options, as I said. You play a card for the numerical value or for the event, yet still these options result in pretty interesting strategic decisions, especially because of the intense interaction of the parties that keep messing with one another. Interaction cards, such as cards that affect the opponents directly, of course, have a big role, and so do reaction cards that allow you to have those cards annulled, cancelled, or sometimes those cards backfire. There definitely are a lot of elements that go into play here, and in a way it even reminded me in general terms of Andean Abyss, in particular of Andean Abyss. Again, this is much simpler than Andean Abyss, for a balance between pretty straightforward choices that you have and a sense of mounting chaos that results from all the actions taken by other players to further their own cause, as well as to limit your progress. And because of this, also the game can be pretty confrontational. You really can do some bad stuff to your opponent, but it is, after all, a game about politics, so what did you expect? Some people only like positive campaigning, it's all about how good I am, but we know that negative campaigning works too, and it wasn't invented yesterday, and the game demonstrates that quite clearly. Another advantage of the not too many options that you have is in the fact that keeps the pace of the game moving. The game can move fast. I see how with the wrong crowd, players counting too much, crunching too many numbers, rather than trying to look at the map and get a sense of the general political landscape of the time. I see maybe there can be a little bit of analysis paralysis here and there, but it doesn't have to be, which in other games happens. The games tends to have that much more. The theme is definitely there. I did learn a lot from this game, or at least I hope I did, because I was exposed to some facts that came from the cards and from the rulebook that I did not know before, so I did not fact check them. I hope they're true. In that case, I did learn a lot, and well, whether they are entirely accurate or not, the sense of the theme being there is still pretty strong. I did have the sense that I was playing a game about politics and about political influence and political trickery, as opposed to just a game about cubes and numbers. So, bottom line, I found this to be a quite enjoyable game. Not casual, but not super involved, so this is really what I called earlier semi-casual, approachable, with a lot of interaction, fun experience overall, and a good sense of theme. Definitely a game that I enjoyed playing.